Once you have your auto level set up and level and you've spun it in a circle and confirmed this, it's now time to bring your environment into focus. You do this by the knobs on the side, and as you can see through the video, turning these knobs will take your environment in and out of focus. So you can see through the auto level that I've brought the leveling rod into focus and in the crosshairs. And I did that by first using these sights at the top to get the general area, and then I focused in more in depth on what was happening on the leveling rod. Go for it.
So once we've identified the site for our bridge and we have an idea of about where we want to put our abutments, we want to define where the center line is going to be. The definition of a line, right, is the shortest distance between 2 points. So what you want to do is identify a location on each side of the river that is never going to go away, potentially for 1 to 2 years, that you can always come back to identify as your center line. For instance, we have a tree over here, and this tree is highly unlikely to go away in the next 2 years. So what we could do is cut into the bark, for example, to essentially scar the tree to help us identify where one of our benchmarks would be, or we could make a pile of rocks in like a cairn, or we could dig a hole and place a large log. All three of those are different ways that I've seen benchmarks be made that will last a long time. You can also spray paint, yet spray paint can wear off after about a year depending on how rainy the location is. And one time what we actually ended up doing is we didn't have any really good way of doing this, and we only had nails to mark survey points. So we made a benchmark out of a nail, and the community members whose land it was knew exactly where that nail was, as he had a rock that he had placed over the nail, and he went and checked on it often, so he was able to take us right back to where that benchmark was. So once you have identified your center line, you want to identify a benchmark on each side, and then you want to set up your leveling, your auto level and your tripod along that center line. So we know where center line about is going to be, and we've identified that tree right there is going to be the back of, or is going to be our benchmark on this side. So now that we have that benchmark on this side for our center line, we did the same thing on the other center line. It's time to set up our tripod in the middle there. We want to set up our tripod the fewest numbers of times because it's one of the most time-consuming processes of surveying. And so to do that, we want to make sure that we set it up tall enough that it can see the ground going backwards, but not too tall so that way we can't see the ground going forwards. So choosing the location of this survey benchmark is important.
Okay.
So Brenton just shot this point, and so he took the measurements to determine how far away I am at this point from the auto level. But we can now verify this by taking our auto level, because it is in essence a really tall ruler, and we could lay it down from the point that I was at up to the tripod, and give us a sanity check of whether or not that distance is in fact correct. So what I like to do, if you had a plumb bob, you could use a plumb bob. We don't have a plumb bob, so I'm going to improvise here. You could take a pine cone, go from the leveling screw that's at the bottom here, drop the pine cone, make sure your hand's out of the way, and see where it landed. And now you can take a measurement to get a rough estimate to double check the measurement that you're also getting from your auto level.
Okay. So because we're shooting this all along the center line of the bridge and we're doing everything in a line, there's only two directions we can go. And when we're shooting, we'll refer to that as backsight and foresight. So when we're shooting towards the river, that's going to be a foresight. So because as you can see the river is down there, my first shot in this direction is going to be a foresight. But then once we've established a turning point, let's say right here, and I had my back to the river and I was shooting back in this direction, that would be a backsight. Now, when you're trying to keep all these things straight in your head, remember, as we've mentioned in other courses, that as you're looking downstream in the river, there's going to be a left and a right. So as you're looking downstream, the left side of the river will always be on your left, and the right side of the river will be on your right. And we can use that to help us corroborate these directions when we're talking about backsight and foresight, and make sure that everything works out. So in order to complete the survey of my bridge, I'll start working down my center line and taking shots. But the first problem I'm going to encounter is as I'm going down the slope, I notice that my established benchmark is going to shoot above this leveling rod. And say this is as far as my leveling rod could go, or the slope is too big and at full length you still can't see it, I'm now going to need some other strategy in order to shoot and get the distance and elevation here. So instead, I'm going to walk up the hill a bit so that my leveling rod is in sight of my auto level. I'm going to shoot and create a new established benchmark in theory, and with this, I now know the distance and elevation of this point, so then I can come and move my auto level to this point and bring the leveling rod back down, and we can inch our way down the slope in this manner. Now, instead of calling all of these points benchmarks, I'll be referring to that point as a turning point, because it's a known elevation that we found and we use to turn around and keep moving down slope. So it'd be pretty normal for us to have to communicate from really far distances when we're surveying, so there's a good chance Jay is not going to be able to hear me. And because of that, I'll use arm signals and things we've previously agreed upon for him to move around with the leveling rod. So first of all, if I want him to go and actually move harsh in one direction, I'll just throw my arm out to that side. Now once I have him in sight with the leveling rod, I'll do more soft motions with my arm to have him move the rod around and sway back and forth so I have the crosshairs in sight. So if I want him to really move over to one side, I'll come all the way down to that side. But if I want him just to move a little bit, I'll come up here, and when it's right on point, I'll go like this and form an X with my arm. Now finally, if I need him to extend the leveling rod, I'll do this motion over my head. Go for it.
So for long distances, sometimes it's very difficult to read the numbers on the leveling rod. And so, and as well as to keep the leveling rod straight and level, both perpendicular to the ground and left and right. So to avoid the uncertainty associated with that, so for instance, 1 centimeter of uncertainty as measured on the leveling rod at 100 meters away is actually an error on the ground in the XY direction of 1 meter. So to avoid that uncertainty, one strategy that you can use is called rocking the level, or rocking the leveling rod. So to do that, you want to take the leveling rod and rock it back and forth. So to try the telescope is over here. You're rocking it back and forth towards the telescope, and the person that's reading from the telescope is going to read the top number that they see as you are rocking.